Man can only become whole through the knowledge and acceptance of his own unconscious. You know that feeling when your chest tightens for no reason, as if an invisible hand were pressing against your heart? You try to shake it off. Take a deep breath, distract yourself, focus on something else. But it lingers. It hums beneath your skin like a low, anxious current that won't let you rest. You call it stress, overthinking, maybe burnout. But what if it's something else? What if it's your own soul knocking from the inside, asking to be heard? Carl Jung once said that anxiety isn't just a symptom to be eliminated. It's the first messenger of the unconscious, the whisper that something within us wants to live, to breathe, to change form. It's not the enemy, it's the signal. It's the psyche's way of saying, you can't keep living like this. When your outer life becomes too rigid, too driven by control and performance, the inner life begins to rebel. It doesn't use words. It uses sensations, a tight chest, a racing mind, a sudden wave of dread that appears out of nowhere. In The Nature of the Psyche, Jung explains that the unconscious behaves in a compensatory manner toward the consciousness. That means whenever we live in only one direction, all logic and no intuition, all action and no reflection, the unconscious creates tension to bring balance. Anxiety is that tension. It's the friction that forms when what you pretend to be and what you truly are can no longer coexist peacefully. You may think the discomfort is punishment, but it's invitation, a sacred pull toward a forgotten part of you. Imagine your psyche as a river that has been dammed for years. The pressure builds not because something is wrong, but because life wants to flow again. The anxiety is a crack in the dam, the sign that the old structure can't hold forever. And yet, most of us fight it. We numb it with noise, with endless scrolling, with achievements that momentarily silence the fear. We run from the tension, when what it really needs is acknowledgement. The body doesn't lie. The chest tightens when the truth is ignored. The breath shortens when the soul is unheard. Every anxious thought is like a flare shot into the sky, a signal from the depths saying, pay attention, there's something here you've buried. Maybe the panic before a meeting isn't just fear failure. Maybe it's the inner voice that's tired pretending. Maybe the sleepless nights aren't just random. Maybe they're your psyche refusing to rest in a life that doesn't fit anymore. Jung saw neurosis not as illness, but as a call toward greater wholeness. He wrote that the unconscious seeks to restore the lost balance of the psyche. When one side of us, the rational, the productive, the good, dominates, the other side sends symptoms to remind us of what we've abandoned. So what if your anxiety isn't there to destroy you, but to rebuild you? What if it's not a curse, but a compass pointing you back to yourself? The knot in your chest is not random. It's a symbol, a messenger, the language of the soul translated into the body. When you stop fighting it, when you pause long enough to listen, it begins to loosen, not because it disappears, but because it has finally been understood. The truth is, the mind that torments you is also the mind that can heal you. The same energy that fuels your panic is the energy that, when transformed, fuels your purpose. That's why Jung saw anxiety as the first step in individuation, the process through which we stop living half-lives and begin becoming whole. So, if your heart races, if your breath catches, if you feel like you're being pulled apart, don't rush to silence it. Ask it what it's trying to reveal. Because behind the panic, behind the shaking hands and sleepless nights, there's something sacred moving. Maybe the knot in your chest isn't a problem to fix. Maybe it's a portal to the self, a reminder that the discomfort you fear is actually the doorway to becoming who you truly are. And perhaps the question is no longer, how do I stop feeling this way? But rather, what is this feeling trying to show me? Because what if the very thing you call anxiety is your soul learning to speak again? What if this force inside you isn't against you, but guiding you somewhere new? That's what the next part begins to reveal. Anxiety is like looking into a cracked mirror. You still see yourself, but the image is distorted, fragmented, trembling with light and shadow. You try to wipe the glass, polish it, make the reflection behave, but the crack isn't dirt. It's truth. It's the symbol of the psyche that has been split between what it shows to the world and what it hides from itself. The anxiety doesn't lie. It exaggerates, yes, but only to make you look closer. Carl Jung once wrote that symptoms are nature's attempts to heal. The shaking hands, the racing thoughts, the sleepless nights, they're not random malfunctions of a broken system. They're messages from the unconscious. When you ignore what the inner world is trying to tell you, the body becomes its translator. Your pulse becomes its language. Your attention becomes its alphabet. Every panic, every restless night is the unconscious whispering. You've lost connection to something essential. We were raised to believe that strength means control, that to be valuable we must be composed, productive, useful. So we bury what doesn't fit that image. The tears, the fatigue, the fear. But what is buried alive doesn't die. It waits. It gathers strength in the dark. And from beneath the surface, it begins to move. That movement is what we feel as anxiety. The trembling of the unconscious trying to rebalance a life that has leaned too far into one side of the self. In the ego and the unconscious, Jung explains, the unconscious is never at rest. It is always arranging and rearranging its contents. That means the psyche is constantly in motion, always trying to integrate what consciousness has rejected. Anxiety then isn't punishment, it's process. It's the soul's attempt to reorganize what has been divided. It's the friction of transformation, the sound of the pieces shifting into place. But when we label this movement as bad, we interrupt its purpose. We medicate silence into it. We scroll past it. We fill our calendars to avoid it. Yet the unconscious doesn't vanish because we look away. It simply finds new ways to be heard, through tension in the jaw, a racing heart, a mind that can't stop thinking. What we call symptom is often the soul's last resort to get our attention. Imagine your psyche as that cracked mirror again. Each fracture represents a part of you that has been denied. The child who wasn't allowed to cry, the artist who wasn't allowed to dream, the lover who wasn't allowed to feel. You stand before the glass, seeing only the distortion, thinking something is wrong with you. But the crack is not the problem. It's the evidence of impact. It shows where life has touched you deeply. And yet, we live in a culture that teaches us to cover the mirror instead of repairing it. We pretend the crack isn't there. We smile wider, speak louder, move faster, hoping the noise will drown out the echo of the break. But the unconscious keeps sending waves to the reflection until you finally stop and listen. The anxiety you feel is that vibration, the energy of something trying to align within you. Maybe what you call panic is actually a psychic reorganization, a realignment of values, a reordering of priorities. Maybe what feels like falling apart is really the dismantling of a false image, a mirror that can no longer hold the weight of who you become. Because deep down, your soul knows the truth. Healing doesn't begin when the crack disappears. It begins when you're willing to look into it, without turning away. So the next time the wave hits, the heart pounding, the hands trembling, the breath trapped somewhere between fear and surrender, remember, this isn't weakness. It's communication. It's the dialogue between the parts of you that want to live together again. Anxiety distorts, yes, but it also reveals. It breaks the mirror, not to destroy your reflection, but to show you the places that long for reintegration. But what happens when we keep ignoring this voice, when we keep patching over the mirror and calling it strength? The next block reveals the price of that escape. You can get used to living under pressure. At first, it's temporary, just a busy week, a demanding job, a rough patch. Then it becomes a rhythm. The constant alertness, the clenched jaw, the shallow breath, they start to feel normal. You wake up already bracing for impact, pretending you're fine, telling yourself everyone feels this way. On the surface, you look functional. Inside, you're running on fumes. You smile when expected, deliver what's required, and collapse in silence once the world stops watching. This is how repression hides in plain sight. Every time you say, "I'm okay," when you're not, a spark is pushed inward. Every unspoken frustration, every swallowed tear, every no you turn into a sure, all that becomes heat trapped beneath the skin. And that heat doesn't disappear. It builds. The soul can't stop producing energy. It only redirects it. Anxiety, then, is not random chaos. It's accumulated emotion seeking release. Jung often compared the psyche to a living system that strives for balance. When one side of you, the social mask, the persona, dominates, the other side begins to boil beneath it. In The Man and His Symbols, he wrote, "The unconscious is a great guide, friend, and advisor to the conscious. That means the unconscious doesn't punish. It participates. It compensates. It tries to restore what you denied, even if it has to do so through symptoms. Think of it like a pressure cooker. Every unacknowledged truth becomes steam. Every forced smile, every moment you suppress anger or sadness, tightens the lid a little more. The heat keeps rising, not to harm you, but to signal that something within you can no longer be contained. If you ignore it, if you keep tightening the lid, one day the pressure finds its own release. Sometimes it looks like a panic attack, sometimes a breakdown, sometimes that mysterious exhaustion where you can't stop crying and don't know why. You might call it weakness, but from a Jungian view, it's the soul's revolt against artificial calm. The psyche cannot thrive in falseness. When truth is buried, the unconscious becomes creative. It sends dreams, symbols, body pains, and anxiety to get your attention. It will not stop because its goal isn't comfort, it's wholeness. The more you fight the symptom, the louder it gets. The more you silence it, the more disguised it becomes. Addictions, sleeplessness, compulsive overworking, emotional numbness. These aren't random flaws. They're coded messages from the depths saying, you're living too far from yourself. What most people call functioning is often controlled collapse. You can maintain it for years, meeting deadlines, raising children, paying bills, while a quiet implosion unfolds beneath. You sense it in the moments between tasks, that sudden wave of emptiness, the way time feels both too fast and too slow. That's the unconscious stirring, reminding you that the soul is not designed for endless suppression. The truth is, the human psyche doesn't want perfection. It wants authenticity. It doesn't demand that you never fall apart. It asks that you stop pretending you're whole when you're not. The repression of emotions isn't strength. It's delay. The longer you hold it back, the more violently it seeks expression. Just like steam inside the sealed pot, the energy of your denied feelings keeps knocking against the walls of your composure, begging for release. Anxiety, then, isn't the enemy within, it's the safety valve. It appears to protect you from an even greater implosion. It's your psyche's way of saying, if you won't feel it consciously, I'll make you feel it physically. And every panic episode, every burst of tears you can't explain, every moment of inexplicable dread, that's your unconscious trying to save you from your own avoidance. But what happens if we keep tightening the lid? If we keep pretending, keep repressing, keep telling ourselves we're fine? The system adapts, but only for so long. Pressure becomes pathology. The friendly signal becomes an inner storm. And when we run from ourselves for too long, the soul eventually stops whispering. It starts to break things open. The next block reveals what happens when we ignore that warning for too long. Ignoring your anxiety is like trying to escape a labyrinth by sprinting faster. Every turn feels like progress until you realize you're running in circles. The walls close in, the air gets heavy, and somewhere between exhaustion and confusion, the body steps in and says, enough. You collapse, not because you're weak, but because the soul refuses to go one step further in the wrong direction. The constant flight from discomfort creates a strange kind of exile, a life lived from the outside in. You become efficient, busy, productive, but hollow. You wake up and perform routines without meaning. You smile, you answer emails, you scroll, you rush, yet deep inside, a question grows louder. Who am I doing all this for? The anxiety that once whispered now hums through every thought, not as noise in the world, but as the echo of your own disconnection. Carl Jung described this phenomenon long before it became epidemic. In Psychology and Religion, he wrote that modern man has lost contact with the numinous, the direct experience of the sacred within himself. Without that connection, the psyche hungers. And when the soul starves, the ego tries to feed on substitutes. Control, consumption, constant doing. The result is urgency without purpose, movement without meaning. We become addicted to motion because stillness exposes the emptiness. You can see it everywhere. People afraid of silence, unable to sit with themselves for even a minute. Phones, music, work, caffeine, All distractions designed to drown out the anxiety that surfaces in the pause. But what is that anxiety, really? It's the soul's cry for depth in a world obsessed with surfaces. It's the inner compass spinning wildly, begging you to remember where the center is. As Jung observed, when we lose the numinous, we lose orientation. The sacred once provided meaning, a sense that life, even in pain, held purpose. Without that axis, consciousness drifts. The individual becomes fragmented, reactive, enslaved by the next demand. You begin to mistake motion for direction, success for peace, approval for love. The labyrinth you're lost in is not out there. It's inside, built from unexamined fears and false identities. You run harder, thinking salvation is around the next corner. A new job, a new relationship, a new achievement. But every path loops back to the same feeling. Something's missing. Because the thing you're chasing can't be found in movement. It's hidden in the stillness you avoid. The more you flee from the discomfort, the tighter the maze becomes. The exit is never forward. It's inward. That's the paradox of anxiety. The more you resist it, the more power it gains. It's not chasing you. It's waiting for you to stop running. It's the guardian of the threshold, holding the key to what you've forgotten. Every time you try to suppress it, the labyrinth grows. Every time you pause and listen, a path appears. But the ego fears surrender. It clings to control because it confuses stillness with death. Yet Jung discovered that the stillness anxiety demands is not the death of the self. It's the death of the false self. The running version, the pretending version, the version built entirely for survival. When you stop, truly stop, something ancient begins to breathe again. The part of you that remembers what peace feels like without needing a reason. The truth is, the more we run from pain, the deeper we carve our prison. The walls are made of distractions. The locks are made of fear. And yet, the labyrinth is not punishment. It's initiation. Every dead end forces you to confront what you've avoided. Every wrong turn strips away illusion until all that's left is the quiet center you abandoned long ago. So yes, ignoring your anxiety might buy you time, but also cost you yourself. It trades authenticity for efficiency, peace for productivity, wholeness for approval. The tragedy is not that you're anxious. It's that you've forgotten why your soul is restless in the first place. But there's another way, a path Jung spent his life mapping, a reversal, a descent that doesn't destroy you, but rebuilds you, a way to transform the pressure of anxiety into the wisdom of awareness. That's where we go next, into the map of transformation, where the soul stops running and begins to return home. Anxiety, at its core, is psychic energy in search of form. When you suppress it, it turns destructive, burning from within, consuming focus, sleep, and peace. But when you listen to it, when you allow it to speak its strange, symbolic language, that same fire becomes transformative. It stops devouring you and begins to forge you like an inner alchemist. Your task isn't to extinguish the flame, but to learn how to hold it, to use it as light instead of letting it scorch. Carl Jung called this process the transcendent function, the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious, the nature of the psyche, section 145. It's not mystical. It's deeply human. It's what happens when you stop trying to dominate the parts of you that hurt and start relating to them. The ego finally sits down with the soul and says, "All right, I'm listening." That's when anxiety stops being a symptom and becomes a teacher. The path begins with recognition. This is where healing truly starts, in naming anxiety not as an enemy, but as energy. You no longer see it as something wrong with you, but as something alive within you. Every wave of panic, every restless night, every surge of tension becomes an invitation to pay attention. The simple act of pausing and saying, "This is energy trying to move through me," already changes a relationship. You shift from resistance to awareness. Next comes integration. This is the part most people skip, because it requires courage. It's about asking what this anxiety is trying to reveal. Beneath every heartbeat of panic, there's a message, a truth about how you've been living. Maybe it's unprocessed grief. Maybe it's a suppressed desire. Maybe it's your intuition, silence for too long, demanding to be heard. Jung said the unconscious isn't just a storage of forgotten pain. It's a living intelligence that seeks to complete us. When you integrate, you start to see that what you've been avoiding might actually be what you've been needing. Then comes conscious action. The energy must move, but now with awareness. That means finding expression, not repression. Write about what you feel instead of judging it. Move your body. Let the tension find rhythm. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. Create something, anything, art, music, movement, because expression is how psychic energy finds its rightful channel. Jung believed that without expression, energy stagnates and becomes neurosis. But when given form, it becomes creation. Finally, surrender, not in the sense of giving up, but in trusting the process. You've recognized, integrated, acted. Now let the psyche breathe. Healing isn't linear, and balance doesn't mean perfection. It means allowing life to flow through you again, knowing that chaos and calm are both parts of the same dance. When you stop forcing control, the psyche naturally reorganizes itself around truth. The fire that once burned begins to illuminate. The energy that once kept you restless starts to propel you forward. This is the alchemy of transformation. The furnace is your body, the flames are your emotions, and the gold is your consciousness, purified through awareness. The same inner heat that once frightened you becomes a source of your strength. The mind that once felt like an enemy becomes a creative ally. And for the first time, you realize anxiety was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to wake you. Through this process, you begin to see that the symptom was a path all along. The panic was not a wall, but a doorway. The tightness in your chest was not punishment, but initiation. The moment you chose to stop running and turn toward the fire, you began the transformation from suffering into meaning. And yet, even on this path, not every step leads upward. The psyche has its own gravity, and there are traps along the way that can pull you back into chaos if you're not mindful. The ego loves to rebuild the prison even after tasting freedom. In the next part, we'll explore those hidden traps, the illusions that make you think you're healing when you're really circling the same labyrinth again. Every inner journey carries its own hidden dangers. The deeper you go into yourself, the more tempting it becomes to believe you've already arrived. Carl Jung warned about this. He called it ego inflation, the illusion that self-knowledge makes us special or superior. But true awakening doesn't glorify the self. It dissolves it. Real transformation doesn't make you extraordinary. It makes you real. The first trap is spiritual isolation. It happens when you mistake solitude for evolution. You start cutting people off, claiming you're protecting your energy. But really, you're protecting your wounds from being touched. Healing isn't about building walls. It's about learning to stay open in a world that can still hurt you. Jung often reminded that individuation doesn't separate you from humanity. It roots you more deeply in it. You don't transcend life. You participate in it more consciously. The second is the savior complex. Once you've touched a glimpse of inner truth, the ego wants to spread it, to fix, to rescue, to guide. You start seeing everyone's shadows except your own. But this is projection disguised as compassion. You cannot lead anyone where you haven't truly gone yourself. Every time you rush to heal another, ask gently, is this empathy or is this avoidance of my own pain? Jung taught that wholeness begins when we take responsibility for our inner world, not when we impose our insights on others. Then comes regression. It's a quiet pull back toward old habits and comforts the moment the discomfort of growth returns. You meditate for weeks, feel peace, and then one argument, one failure, one heartbreak, and suddenly the old anxiety is back whispering, see? Nothing really changed. But regression isn't failure. It's the psyche's way of testing your stability. Like tides that retreat before returning stronger, each setback refines your awareness. The key is to notice the pattern without judgment. Growth isn't a straight climb. It's a spiral, bringing you back to the same lessons until they no longer hurt, only teach. The last and most subtle trap is spiritual arrogance. It wears many masks, the voice that says, I understand things others don't, or I'm above this world's chaos. But enlightenment that separates you from others is just another form of shadow. Jung described the self, the divine center of the psyche, not as a pedestal but as a point of surrender. When the ego bows before the self, humility becomes wisdom. You stop trying to be light and start learning to love your darkness too. The symbol for this stage is the mirror of Narcissus. At first, self-discovery feels intoxicating. You gaze into your own depths and see beauty where you once saw pain. But if you linger too long, the reflection becomes a trap. You fall in love with your image instead of integrating your humanity. The purpose of the mirror isn't admiration, it's recognition. To see clearly, then to return to life carrying what you've seen. That's the true mark of inner work. It doesn't make you untouchable, it makes you more compassionate. It doesn't lift you above others, it draws you closer to them. It turns knowledge into understanding, and understanding into love. Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, by meeting the shadow without fear, and realizing that even it belongs to the same whole. And when you face these inner traps, when the ego stops performing holiness and starts living truth, something extraordinary happens. The same fire that once burned now warms. The same mind that once scattered now gathers. The same anxiety that once ruled you becomes the rhythm of your new beginning. You emerge not as someone perfect, but as someone present. The soul that once behind panic now breathes again, quiet, steady, alive. Rebirth begins the moment you stop running from what you are. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. I choose awareness over escape. And keep walking with us. Your next transformation begins in the next video. There comes a moment when anxiety dissolves, not because the world finally calms down, but because you do. Not because life becomes easier, but because you've learned a new way of being within it. The storm still passes overhead, but now you know it won't sweep you away. The same waves that once drowned you now carry you forward. The silence that used to feel like a threat slowly becomes a homecoming. You no longer fear stillness. You crave it. The heart no longer races to escape itself. It begins to listen. There's a quiet recognition that peace isn't found by escaping movement, but by moving differently, with awareness, with presence, with truth. The world hasn't changed. Your relationship to it has. You start noticing beauty again. The way morning light touches a wall, the rhythm of your breath, the way a small act of kindness steadies you more than any grand success ever did. The calm doesn't come from control, but from connection, from no longer fighting the current, but letting it guide you to where you were always meant to go. Carl Jung wrote in The Man and His Symbols, man can only become whole through the knowledge and acceptance of his own unconscious. That is the moment you've reached, not the end of anxiety, but the integration of it. You no longer see it as a curse, but as a messenger that led you here, to this new stillness, this deeper understanding of who you are. Peace, you realize, isn't the absence of noise. It's a harmony between noise and silence. It's not the escape from fear, but the reconciliation with it. You don't win against anxiety. You translate it. You learn its language. You understand that every panic, every sleepless night, every tremor was your soul's way of pulling you closer to yourself. And when you finally listen, when you allow the message to settle into your bones, something extraordinary happens. The knot in your chest becomes breath. The fire that once burned becomes light. The storm that once terrified you becomes a dawn that illuminates everything. You haven't escaped the labyrinth. You've learned to walk through it without fear. You haven't silenced the mind. You've taught it to listen. You haven't destroyed the symptom. You've embraced the self that was hidden beneath it. The dawn always follows the storm, but this time it's different. You stand at the edge of it with gratitude instead of exhaustion. The same light that once blinded you now warms your face. The same silence that once frightened you now whispers, "You're safe here." Anxiety is the bridge between who you were and who you're ready to become. If this message touched something within you, comment below. I choose to listen to what my soul wants to say.